Hey everybody, we're back out here at the compost pile, and one thing I really took to heart that you guys kept mentioning in the comments of the previous videos is that I really need to know the temperature of the pile more accurately. I showed you before that I had another thermometer that I purchased from a local hardware store that was just really flimsy. It had lost its connection to the gauge and it was no longer calibrated. There was no way to set it back in place and calibrate it. The gauge had completely fogged up and it was just entirely worthless. So before I got involved in trying to worry about gauging the temperature of my pile again, I first sought out what gauge I actually wanted to get into. And the more research I did, it led me to a company called REOTEMP. And I got two of their thermometers that I want to share with you. First is this one. It's their backyard composter thermometer. It runs just under $25, and I'll put a link to it in the description below. And what I really like about it, first thing right out of the box, I can tell it is more stoutly built. The probe in the one that I had previously was maybe half to 3/4 of the diameter of this probe. This one just feels like it can safely go into a compost pile without being damaged or bent at every single go. Also, the dial is hermetically sealed, so I know I'll always be able to read my gauge. It's not going to fog up. It also has some dummy-proof things on here, which is really good for someone like me. On the gauge, there are 3 different sections that have been marked to let you know whether your compost is steady, active, or hot. So it takes a step out from you having to remember those ranges, and as soon as it reads your temperature, you can tell exactly what's happening inside of your compost pile. There's also a lot of good information that I'll have to take into heart myself on the back that is telling you what's actually happening in the steady zone, in the active, and in the hot zone, what to mix in, what not to mix in, and all those kind of good things. So overall, I'm really pleased with this already. And if you're a viewer in the United States, something that you'll appreciate, these are made in the USA. One thing I have to say is I'm going to certainly, even though this is much better constructed than my previous thermometer, I'm going to take a little better care of it. I'm going to make sure that I'm not using the gauge of the thermometer as a handle and pushing it in and out. I'm going to be using the probe and slowly working it in like that. So if you're interested in a backyard thermometer, y'all, I've been happy with this REOTEMP. I've only had it for a couple days, but I'm really happy with how well it is constructed. You can just tell by the feel and look of it that they actually cared about the product that they put out. Now, I also have a much larger thermometer made by REOTEMP. This is their Pro model. And look at this thing. It ought to tell you something when they have to ship you this thermometer in a section of Schedule 40 PVC pipe to protect the probe. I'm pretty happy with this one as well. This one might be for someone who's doing a whole lot more compost than just one pile that they generally check on once a week. This is for someone who's putting out a lot of compost. It's a little bit deeper and comes in a lot longer length, so you can get a pretty big pile measured with this thermometer. It also has threads here at the base of the gauge, and you can attach a handle to this to make it more safe for you inserting and taking the thermometer out so you don't do damage to the probe. They also sell separately a sleeve that you slide this into and protects the probe, so as you're inserting it into your compost, you don't do damage to the probe. I really appreciated that despite how well they make this product, they really focused on the idea of taking care of your equipment. For example, the instructions for this specifically say to start 6 inches from where it meets the compost pile and then slowly get it into the compost pile that way. So we're not using the gauge as a handle for putting the probe in. This also comes in a quick read model where the tip is a little bit less of a diameter, it's a little skinnier. But for my compost pile, it's reading it within about 30 to 45 seconds. So if you can bear standing there for just a minute to make sure that it has topped off, then I don't see a need for you to worry about that. If you're in a commercial environment, it might be something for you to take into account. So now that I've ranted and raved about how much I like these thermometers, let's talk about the compost pile. So the first real change that you'll notice is this wall behind me. I'm going to give credit to that to Leesville Aquaponics. you know, Leesville and I didn't really get off on the best step, but now we enjoy talking to each other on the side. And he was one that recommended having a backstop so that I could use the tractor a little more easily. It was my wife who found the materials to make it happen. So one thing I'm going to do is keep trying to aerate the pile using the tractor, but I'm going to use this backstop to make it easier so that I can do that. And I'll show you how that works in just a second. One thing I wanted to share with you are these. I'm not sure what that is. I believe it is a squash of some kind, which is probably spaghetti squash. That was one of the things that was in the compost earlier. And it's sprouting. But there is some bad news. Both of my REOTEMP thermometers are registering right at 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is right now pretty much a steady cold compost. What I really think it needs to happen, I'm going to mix this up, add some more greens. I'm going to put some coffee grounds in here because I saw Patrick over at 1 Yard Revolution do that, and it heated up his pile like magic. So I'm going to stir this up, add some coffee grounds, add some more greens, and wet it down. So if you watch me, then I'd be pretty surprised if you don't watch Patrick over at 1 Yard Revolution. And he recently showed how he was getting a compost pile of his to heat back up, where he used a pole to burrow down and get some air down into the pile. Then he put coffee grounds in there, and then he wet that area. And he did it at several places throughout his pile so that it wasn't just concentrated in one place. I'm going to mimic that as well, but I'm also adding in these extra greens because I have them to add. So I'm going to add these greens. Now I'm going to go through and do what Patrick did, and I just couldn't believe how quickly and how hot his pile got. And since heat is what I'm looking for, I got to do what I've seen already work. And then I'll come through and clean up the edges of this pile and pile it back on top and cap it off, and come back and check it again a little bit later. So let's get started. Okay, so that's all done up. I'm going to give it a good dousing of water here. And while I'm doing that, I'll say that it's obvious to me why, if you go to a sand company, a rock company, a mulch company, those kind of places, that you're going to see these big bins made out of cinder block and not T-posts and plywood. This isn't going to last very long, not just because it's wood right up against soil, but just because if I bumped into that at all, let's just say 4 T-posts don't make any sort of an enemy for a boda. That thing was ready to just keep walking right over it and laugh the whole time. So it was good for a trial, and I was able to stir it a whole lot easier and better than I have previously. So I might see if maybe I can just learn to be more gentle and still get the same thing accomplished. So we're expecting a rainfall tomorrow. So I am going to cover this up again, but I'm also thinking about trialing with not covering this up. The only thing that concerns me with that is this board, as you see it, is facing exactly east and west, with the south facing this side. So this is going to get to be a very warm area, which means it's going to dry out my pile, which is the real reason I've been covering the compost, is because I'm worried about it drying out more quickly and how much water I'm putting into this, because this is municipal water. So really what I'm doing is spending money every time I pull this trigger. So if I can avoid doing that, then I'm happy with it. So we'll come back in a day and see if this is heated up, if we get the same response that Patrick got with doing the grounds, the coffee grounds in there. So thank you all for watching. Thank you REOTEMP for making a quality product so that I can come back here and actually check the temperature and answer all of your guys' questions. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.